What if I told you that the way your money is managed today wasn't cooked up on Wall Street, but by a 19th century emperor obsessed with funding his war machine? We all know Napoleon Bonaparte as one of history's greatest military minds, a name that means conquest and empire. But behind the thunder of his cannons, a quieter revolution was taking place, one that would reshape the financial world forever. We think of Napoleon as a general, but his greatest conquest might have been the world of finance. He inherited a bankrupt France, and from its smoldering ruins, he forged a playbook that built the very foundations of modern banking. This is the forgotten story of how an emperor's quest for power created a system that, over 200 years later, still dictates how your money is managed, valued, and controlled. This is History's Wealth Playbook. Section 1. The problem: a nation drowning in worthless paper. To really get the genius of Napoleon's strategy, you have to understand the absolute chaos he inherited. Imagine a country where the money in your pocket today is worth half as much tomorrow, and pretty much nothing by next week. That was the reality of late 18th century France. The French Revolution, for all its ideals of liberty and equality, had plunged the nation into a financial abyss. The old, unfair tax system was gone, but nothing stable had replaced it. Facing a crushing debt crisis, the revolutionary government made a fateful decision. They started printing money. This new paper, called the Assignat, wasn't backed by gold or silver, but by the promise of lands seized from the church. It started as a hopeful experiment to jumpstart the economy. But hope doesn't pay the bills. Desperate for cash, the government just couldn't resist the temptation of the printing press. They printed more, and then more still. What began as a stimulus quickly spiraled into one of history's worst cases of hyperinflation. By 1795, the Assignat had lost 99% of its value. Prices for bread and other basics skyrocketed, leading to riots and starvation. Angry mobs roamed Paris, not for political ideals, but for loaves of bread they could no longer afford. Trust, the invisible bedrock of any economy, had vanished. The baker couldn't trust the money he was given, the soldier couldn't trust his pay, and foreign merchants simply refused to trade with France. The country was a financial pariah. The government tried to enforce the Assignat's value with brutal laws. The Reign of Terror even brought the death penalty for questioning the paper money's worth, but you can't force people to believe in a lie. The experiment was a total failure. By 1796, the government publicly gave up, symbolically burning the printing plates in the middle of Paris. This financial chaos created a power vacuum. The French people were exhausted by the instability. They craved order, reliability, and a leader strong enough to provide it. This desperation set the stage perfectly for a young, ambitious general who promised to restore not just national glory, but financial sanity. Napoleon Bonaparte was about to step onto the stage, not just as a military savior, but as France's chief financial architect. Section 2. The Solution Part 1. The Banque de France, a pillar of stability. When Napoleon seized power in November 1799, he knew military victories meant nothing if he couldn't win the war on economic collapse. France needed a new financial heart. His first and most important move was creating an institution that would become the blueprint for central banks everywhere, the Banque de France. Founded on January 18, 1800, just 2 months after he took power, the Banque de France was a complete break from the Revolution's failed ideas. Unlike the government-run printing presses that spat out worthless assignats, this was a private company. Napoleon himself initiated it, but this distinction was crucial. He understood that to rebuild trust, the institution managing the nation's money had to seem independent from the short-term meddling of politicians. He persuaded the richest bankers in Paris to be its founding shareholders. More than that, Napoleon threw his immense political weight behind the project, convincing his family and inner circle to invest. This gave the new institution a massive capital base and, more importantly, the imperial seal of approval. His message was clear: this wasn't another temporary scheme. This was the new foundation of French finance, and he was personally guaranteeing it. The bank's main job was to issue a stable currency. It was given the exclusive right to issue banknotes in Paris, a privilege later extended to the whole country. But these banknotes were different. Unlike the Assignat, they were convertible, meaning anyone could walk into the bank and exchange their paper note for its value in gold or silver coin. This was the anchor of its credibility. It was a promise, backed by solid metal, that this paper had real value. Still, people were skeptical. Disasters like the Assignat mess had made the French deeply suspicious of any paper money. So, Napoleon tried a clever strategy. The first banknotes were in huge denominations of 500 and 1,000 francs, sums only useful for big commercial transactions. He wasn't trying to force a new currency on the average citizen. Instead, he targeted the engine of the economy first, trade and industry. By giving businesses a stable way to make deals and get credit, the Banque de France slowly injected confidence back into the economy. As commerce revived, businesses made profits, which could then be taxed. For the first time in a decade, the French state had a predictable income. Napoleon had created a powerful engine of finance that would not only stabilize France but would also provide the model for how nations manage their money to this day. But this was only step one. To truly unite the country, he needed a currency that everyone could hold in their hand and trust. Section 3. The Solution Part 2. The Franc Germinal, the people's money. The Banque de France was the big-picture solution, but Napoleon knew that for the average person, trust wasn't some abstract idea. It was the weight of a coin in their palm. While the bank's notes were used by the wealthy, the rest of the country was still a mess of old royal coins and revolutionary scraps. He had to create a single, trustworthy currency for everyone. His answer came on March 28, 1803, with the law that created the Franc Germinal. This wasn't just a new coin, it was a whole new philosophy of money. The law was beautiful in its simplicity. 5 grams of silver, 9/10 fine, constitute the monetary unit which retains the name of franc. Think about that. For the first time, the value of the franc wasn't based on a king's decree or a revolutionary promise. It was defined by a precise, verifiable weight of precious metal. The Franc Germinal was basically a receipt for a fixed amount of silver. The law also set a fixed gold-to-silver ratio of 15.5 to 1, creating new gold coins, including the famous 20-franc Napoleon. This was a masterstroke of public psychology. Anyone, from a farmer in a rural market to a merchant in a big city, knew exactly what their money was worth. A 1-franc coin contained exactly 4.5 grams of pure silver. Its official value and its metal value were the same. This created a level of trust that had been missing in France for generations. The baker could accept a franc for bread, confident he could use it to buy flour tomorrow. The soldier knew his pay would hold its value when he sent it home. The impact was immediate. The Franc Germinal swept away the monetary chaos of the past decade. It unified the country under one reliable system, making trade and business easier for everyone. Its stability was so legendary that the Franc Germinal would remain the legal basis of France's currency for an incredible 120 years, all the way until 1928, making it one of the most stable currencies in modern European history. Napoleon's conquests even spread this system across the continent. Countries in his sphere of influence, like Italy, Switzerland, and Belgium, adopted currencies based on his model. This laid the groundwork for Europe's first major currency bloc, the Latin Monetary Union, decades later. In creating the Franc Germinal, Napoleon did more than just mint a coin. He showed that a government's greatest economic tool isn't the printing press, but its ability to create and maintain unwavering public trust. Section 4. The Solution Part 3. Fiscal Discipline and the Machinery of State. A central bank and a stable currency were the pillars of Napoleon's new financial order, but he knew even the strongest house can collapse if the inside is rotten. He had to completely rewire the government's relationship with money. He needed to build a culture of fiscal discipline and accountability, something totally foreign to both the old monarchy and the chaotic revolutionaries. His key man for this job was Nicolas-François Mollien, a brilliant but often overlooked financier. Appointed Minister of the Public Treasury in 1806, Mollien was a master of numbers and systems. Together, Napoleon the visionary and Mollien the implementer built a modern state designed for one main purpose: the efficient collection and management of money. One of their most lasting creations was the Cour des Comptes, or Court of Accounts, established in 1807. This was an independent court with a single mission: to audit all public spending. It was a powerful watchdog designed to prevent corruption and waste, a revolution in government accountability. Napoleon gave it a rank just below the highest court in France, showing just how important it was. At the same time, the tax system itself was completely overhauled. They didn't just lower taxes, they made them predictable, efficient, and centrally controlled. They professionalized the collection of direct taxes and brought back indirect taxes on things like salt, tobacco, and alcohol. While these weren't popular, they provided a steady, reliable flow of income. Mollien even introduced double-entry bookkeeping to the French treasury, a basic accounting practice that gave them unprecedented clarity and control over state finances. This disciplined financial machine allowed Napoleon to do two things at once: fund his wars and rebuild France. The money collected was meticulously managed to support his massive army. But that stable domestic tax base also funded huge public works projects. New roads, bridges, and canals were built, physically unifying the nation and boosting the economy. Even the Louisiana Purchase was, at its heart, a financial move. Napoleon sold the territory because he desperately needed the cash to finance his war against Britain. Through these reforms, a government auditor, professional tax collection, and strategic investment, Napoleon transformed France from a bankrupt nation into a lean, efficient financial power. He built the masses of granite he always talked about, strong institutions that would outlive his empire and become the template for the modern administrative state. Napoleon's empire, built with cannon and bayonet, lasted for just over a decade. But his financial empire is still with us today. The playbook he wrote in the face of total economic collapse became the blueprint for modern finance. When you look at your country's central bank, you're seeing the ghost of the Banque de France. When you hold a currency with a stable, predictable value, you're benefiting from the core idea of the Franc Germinal, that money must be an instrument of trust. The very concept of a government having an audited budget and a professional treasury department traces its roots back to the systems Napoleon put in place. He's remembered as a general, but maybe Napoleon's most enduring legacy isn't on the battlefield, but in the bank. He proved that military might means nothing without financial stability. He showed that the true power of a nation isn't its ability to print money, but its ability to command the people's absolute trust in that money. So the next time you use a banknote or even pay your taxes, remember the emperor. Because the true legacy of Napoleon's wars isn't just in the history books, but in the very architecture of the financial system that shapes our daily lives. If you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe to History's Wealth Playbook for more lessons from the past that explain our present. Like this video and share it with someone who loves history and wealth. Drop a comment below and tell us, whose financial secrets should we uncover next?